Hello and welcome to the Within the Boggart Wood Bare Bones project. Now, for the last couple of years, I've been running the Within the Boggart Wood Paranormal podcast, where I've told stories on folklore, ghost lore and history, focusing mainly on the north of England and the Scottish borders. Recently though, I've noticed increased listener interest in stories that deal with investigating the paranormal, specifically ghosts, so I decided to set up this side project rather than essentially hijack my own podcast. The aim of the Bare Bones project is to investigate claims of the paranormal, but with a rare twist on what you normally find online, as initially I'll be investigating the investigation methods used by paranormal enthusiasts, ghost hunters and paranormal investigators in their hunt for the ever-elusive evidence of ghosts. Just to clarify straight away though, this is not a debunking project. This is an investigation project which will meander in the direction the data takes us. Overall though, inevitably, investigation does lead to debunking in some cases, as in my view you simply can't actually claim to investigate the paranormal without actually debunking where the evidence identifies the need. As well as looking at methodology, I'll also be researching the tricks and deceptions used by the more unscrupulous members of the paranormal community to fake alleged ghostly activity. And then I'll be looking at my own back catalogue of investigations from the last 2 decades. I'm hoping that this project will constantly evolve as more information becomes available, and I'm hoping that anyone interested in the project will get in touch. That is, as long as the communication is polite, reasoned, and lacking the usual threats and insults that dominate the messages that those who question in the paranormal community receive. For the purposes of this introduction and clarity going forward, there are some things I need to establish at this stage, which I'll now detail item by item. The definition of the term paranormal and why debunking is necessary. So if you're still here and haven't thrown anything at the screen yet, let me explain my view on this. Initially though, the first thing to look at is the definition of the term paranormal. If this comes over as a little condescending in any way, I do apologise, as it's not meant to be, but I think it's important to look at this with the most basic element first. For something to be classed as paranormal, it must be something not explainable by known science. Therein lies the issue, because I can honestly say, with everyone that I've ever known, I don't believe I've met one person with the whole depository of human scientific knowledge in their brain. So how can your normal person even recognise a paranormal event if they don't know what is actually explainable by science and what isn't? So again, from my point of view, what we as individuals see is what I'd call perceived paranormal, where an alleged paranormal event is identified based on the limits of our own personal knowledge, biases and experiences. Very basically put, given a single event, a person with a background in medicine may have a different interpretation to someone with a background in chemistry, or physics, or engineering, or archaeology, and so on. Folk with the same skill sets mentioned above may also interpret things differently, depending on their personal religious belief system. I hope you can see where I'm going with this. In a way, while actually identifying a paranormal phenomenon requires you to understand all of science as we currently know it, investigating to the best of your ability and debunking something as normal is quite a bit easier and actually doable. In other words, know your limitations. Ghost hunter versus investigator. During this project you'll note I'll differentiate between ghost hunters and investigators. To me, an investigator, without wanting to sound condescending again, investigates. This involves detailed observation, data recording, and where in all cases possible the identification of the cause and source of alleged phenomena. The investigator is a skeptic. Without skepticism and critical thinking, you can't investigate. A ghost hunter, on the other hand, attends sites of alleged paranormal activity to reinforce their own personal beliefs through spiritual means or technical gadgetry. There is a reliance these days on apps, tools such as the Ouija, night vision cameras, and little or no effort is made to identify naturally occurring or man-made elements. As the focus of commercial ghost hunts is entertainment, for the purpose of this project, I also put these events and groups into this category. The need for paranormal explanations. To clarify the focus of this investigation, the ongoing development and any results of this project are not aimed at any specific individuals, ghost hunting teams, societies, organisations or TV shows. The project simply aims to give a fair, honest and where possible factual investigation of the topics covered. I'm very aware of the topic of the supernatural, and ghosts in particular, being an emotive subject for many out there, whether dealing with elements such as grief and loss, trying to find your place in the universe, or simply seeking answers for something you've experienced. On many levels, belief in ghosts can also have a big impact on such elements as religious belief, how folk run their day-to-day lives, and how they interact with others. Now, one element that I haven't seen change much in the last 20 years is how many folk in the paranormal community gravitate towards certain personalities, specific ghost hunters and presenters, for example, with a number of groups and ghost hunters out there developing almost cult-like followings, where everyone perceived as having a go or debunking their idols is immediately targeted with threats of violence, bullying, hate, and these days social media campaigns to bring down the perceived aggressor. I will state again, this project is not aimed at any individual or group, so if you as a follower of a group perceive such a link, then that actually falls to you and may highlight an issue with your own idols. In this project, I will not be doing any debunking of named groups and individuals. There are some really good folk out there that already do that, so if that's your thing, then look them up. I'm attempting to put recommendations on my YouTube channel when I work out how to do it. For entertainment purposes only. Can anyone in the UK recall the BBC show Ghost Watch, first aired on Halloween 1992? The show was billed as a live investigation into what was portrayed as a poltergeist-infested house, presented by the then well-known personalities of Michael Parkinson, Sarah Green, Mike Smith and Craig Charles. The show starts with the background behind the haunting, showing two young kids terrified in their bedroom as things fly off shelves while they scream and cry, allegedly recorded on a CCTV camera. The show then moves into interviewing the family being affected by the poltergeist, before moving into the live investigation properly, including elements of possession, poltergeist activity caught on camera, and one of the presenters being trapped with the angry ghost. Now, bearing in mind this wasn't normal on TV at the time. There just weren't any ghost hunting shows on TV and no internet like we have now, and to the vast majority of people watching, the events of that show were happening in front of their eyes and were real. BBC statistics from the time showed that they received approximately 1 million calls from viewers that night, most angrily complaining about the content and not realising that the reality was that the show was what is now called a mockumentary, and that the whole episode was entirely fictitious, and other than the presenters, everyone they were watching were actors. One of the major problems was that one of the presenters, Sarah Green, was a much-loved children's TV personality, and many parents had assumed that as she was in it, the show would be suitable for their kids. But it was simply a horror story of a new kind for Halloween that year, based on the case of the Enfield poltergeist. It was designed to frighten, shock and leave the viewers with a massive sense of unease. But no one had even considered the psychological impact it would have on the unprepared and in many cases young audience. The impact in fact was bad enough that presenter Sarah Green had to make an announcement later on her children's BBC show to categorically state that the show hadn't been real. But for some that wasn't enough. The Broadcasting Standards Commission received 35 complaints, but only one of them showed the true repercussions of the show. One of the young audience, an 18-year-old with learning difficulties, became obsessed with what he'd watched, and 5 days after the broadcast he took his own life, leaving a note to his family saying, "If there are ghosts, I will be with you always as a ghost." Obviously, his family blamed the show, and when the Broadcasting Standards Commission refused their complaint, they took it to the High Court and won a judicial review requiring the Commission to review their complaint. Their ultimate ruling was that the BBC had a duty to do more than simply hint at the deception it was practicing on the audience. In Ghostwatch, there was a deliberate attempt to cultivate a sense of menace. It was classed as unnecessarily graphic and frightening, and that the use of children's TV presenters meant that some kids got to watch a programme they really shouldn't have. In fact, a study reported in the British Medical Journal 2 years later reported on the show having caused post-traumatic stress disorder in 2 10-year-old viewers, with peer reviews citing a further 4 cases in kids between 11 and 14, though in these cases the symptoms were fleeting and more akin to extreme anxiety. Now, taking all this into account, fast forward to present day. The content shown now, as a matter of course, is much more aggressive in nature, as that's what brings in the views, and again as mentioned before, a lot of these shows have developed cult-like followings who hang on their every word. Some of these shows use the label for entertainment purposes only. In the early years, the UK show Most Haunted came with that label to tell viewers that their content wasn't real. There are those who will believe it anyway, but at least that simple label shows due diligence, potentially learning from the BBC's mistake in 1992. There are those, however, that don't display that label and present their shows as real. Coupled with the massive increase in the impact influencers now have, these shows open vulnerable viewers to the same, and in most cases worse, psychological effects than Ghostwatch did. But when you look at these individuals, groups and organisations, does anything they present, any of the methods used for example, hold any grounding in reality? One of the problems is that despite a growing number of debunkers rearing their heads in the paranormal community, the ratio of critical thinking to blind belief is staggeringly unbalanced. So this bare bones project will look at these things objectively, and will try to explain in the simplest way possible where many phenomena cited as paranormal by ghost hunters, the paranormal community influencers, and alleged investigators alike, have often way more mundane explanations. If even one person, teetering on the edge of darkness due to the content of these shows, views this and gains calm and understanding from it, then it's time well spent, I think. My personal bias. It is only fair to recognise that while the project aims to be as objective as possible, I'm aware that my own personal bias may occasionally rear its head. For clarity, I've experienced some really weird things that I can't explain, but I class myself as a true skeptic, i.e. a person who questions the accepted norm. I also have a peculiar sense of sarcastic humour as well, which can sometimes appear derogatory, but be aware that I'm my own strongest critic, so if it appears that I'm laughing at someone or something, it's more likely I'm laughing at myself, and probably not in a good way. So how will the project work? First of all, I'd like to say that this isn't replacing the Within the Boggart podcast, it'll run alongside it. Also, this isn't my job. Professionally, I run my own archaeological consultancy and practice, primarily dealing with planning condition archaeology and historic building recording, which as you may imagine takes up a lot of my time. So the answer as to how this will work can be answered as slowly. The first section of the project, to get the ball rolling so to speak, looks at a passion of mine, photography, and examines how photographic effects and practices have been misconstrued as paranormal, and how fakes have been deliberately made. I've also put up a couple of short episodes in the deception and trickery section. I've linked my podcast episodes relating to the investigations as a placeholder in that section for now. Down the line, I'm hoping even where an investigation section in the website looks complete, it'll change and grow depending on new information or feedback I receive, so it'll become more fluid as time progresses. So without further ado, please have a look at the project at withintheboggartwood.org.uk/barebones. I hope you find the content informative and enjoyable, and do feel free to get in touch. Contact details and potential repercussions if you misbehave can be found on the website. Cheers everyone.